We're all pretty bizarre. Some of us are just better at hiding it, that's all. The Breakfast Club wasn't just a teen movie, it was a cultural revolution disguised as detention, a powder keg of raw emotion that forever changed how Hollywood portrayed young America. Behind the pristine halls of Shermer High School, chaos reigned supreme. Judd Nelson bullied Molly Ringwald so relentlessly that director John Hughes nearly fired him on the spot. A 150-minute director's cut mysteriously vanished, and Rick Moranis, yes, Ghostbusters, Rick Moranis, was originally cast but fired after turning the janitor into a cartoonish Russian caricature. Today, we're revealing 20 weird facts about the Breakfast Club that even die-hard fans don't know. From dangerous method acting to studio interference that almost derailed the entire project, these secrets expose the turbulent reality behind the teen classic. And stick around for our bonus fact, the shocking revelation about the film's most iconic moment that wasn't even in the script. Ready to see what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling? Let's dive in. Number 1, the script was written in 48 hours flat. John Hughes didn't labor for months crafting The Breakfast Club. He wrote the entire screenplay in a creative frenzy over July 4th weekend, 1982, just 2 days. It wasn't a carefully constructed masterpiece meticulously workshopped through endless drafts. It was raw emotion poured onto paper during a fevered burst of inspiration. Hughes, fueled by memories of his own turbulent high school experience, barely slept as he hammered out dialogue that would define a generation. The studio executives couldn't believe what they were reading. Here was a teen movie that didn't pander or patronize. No beach parties, no ridiculous hijinks, just 5 kids talking in a library. On paper, it sounded like box office poison, yet something about Hughes's authentic voice connected so powerfully that Universal greenlit the project despite their reservations. What emerged from those 48 sleepless hours wasn't just a script, it was a cultural landmark that captured the Universal adolescent experience with devastating accuracy. Number 2. The original title was The Lunch Bunch. The cultural touchstone we know as The Breakfast Club almost hit theaters with the significantly less impactful title, The Lunch Bunch. Not exactly the kind of name that echoes across generations. Hughes abandoned the original title after a friend mentioned that morning detention at his high school was called The Breakfast Club. The moment he heard it, Hughes knew he'd found the perfect name, mysterious enough to intrigue audiences, yet oddly specific to the teenage experience. The title change wasn't just cosmetic, it fundamentally shifted the film's identity, creating an immediate sense of belonging, a club, rather than just a random collection of students. It suggested ritual, tradition, and a shared experience that audiences could identify with even before seeing a single frame. Studio executives initially pushed back, arguing that audiences would think it was a movie about breakfast or morning television. But Hughes held firm, understanding that the enigmatic quality of the name would draw people in rather than confuse them. The title's ambiguity became part of its allure, creating an instant mythology that continues to resonate 40 years later. Number 3, Judd Nelson was almost fired for bullying Molly Ringwald. Judd Nelson's portrayal of Rebel John Bender feels so authentic because he never stopped being Bender, even when the cameras weren't rolling. Nelson employed intense method acting techniques, staying in character between takes and directing Bender's antagonistic attitude toward Molly Ringwald off camera. The harassment became so severe that John Hughes, fiercely protective of the 16-year-old Ringwald, was ready to fire Nelson on the spot. Witnessing Hughes's fury, Ringwald later remarked, "I had never seen John so angry. He was really irate." The situation reached a boiling point as Hughes began making calls to recast the role midway through production. What saved Nelson's job wasn't studio intervention, but a cast rebellion. Led by Ali Sheedy, the actors banded together to convince Hughes that Nelson's intensity, while difficult, was creating the authentic tension the film required. Ringwald herself advocated for keeping him, recognizing that his edgy performance was irreplaceable. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Just like in the film itself, the cast's unlikely alliance overcame their differences to support one of their own. Nelson stayed, but the experience created lasting tension between him and Hughes, who vowed never to work with the actor again. Number 4, Rick Moranis was originally cast as the janitor. In one of Hollywood's strangest casting misfires, comedy legend Rick Moranis was originally hired to play Carl the janitor, but was fired after just 1 week of filming. The reason? He insisted on playing the character as an over-the-top Russian immigrant with gold teeth and a bizarre accent. The janitor was written as a grounded, philosophical character who sees through the students' facades and offers subtle wisdom. Moranis, fresh off comedy hits, pushed for a cartoonish interpretation that clashed dramatically with the film's authentic tone. Producer Ned Tannen watched Moranis's dailies in disbelief, immediately recognizing the tonal disaster unfolding. When Hughes hesitated to fire the established star, Tannen took matters into his own hands, declaring, "Well, I guess I have to," and dismissed Moranis from the production. John Kapelos was quickly brought in as a replacement, delivering the nuanced performance that became an essential counterbalance to the teenage drama. Meanwhile, Moranis publicly described the departure as a mutual decision, hoping to work with Hughes again in the future, a collaboration that never materialized. The Ayas incident reveals how precarious the film's delicate tonal balance was and how one misjudged performance could have derailed the entire project. Number 5. The library was actually built in the school gymnasium, the iconic library where our 5 detention-bound teenagers spend their Saturday doesn't actually exist. The real Maine North High School's library was far too small for filming. So, production designer John Corso transformed the school's gymnasium into the 2-story library set we see on screen. This wasn't a simple redecoration. It was a massive construction project completed in just 3 weeks. Carpenters built the entire second level from scratch, installed the massive staircase, and created custom bookshelves filled with thousands of actual books borrowed from local libraries. The irony of constructing an elaborate fake library inside a real school wasn't lost on the crew. Production assistant Julie Glickman recalled, "We had teachers stopping by daily, joking about how they wished their actual library was half as impressive as our fake one." The gymnasium transformation came with unexpected challenges. During the marijuana smoking scene, the heat from the film lights caused the gym's fire sprinklers to activate, drenching the set and forcing an emergency evacuation. The crew spent an entire night drying books and repairing water damage before filming could resume the next day. This elaborate deception perfectly mirrors the film's central theme, that nothing is quite what it appears to be on the surface. Number 6. Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall were the only real teenagers. While The Breakfast Club perfectly captures the adolescent experience, most of its teenage cast were actually well into their 20s. Only Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall, both 16 during filming, were actual high school-aged performers. Judd Nelson topped the age chart at 24, with Ali Sheedy and Emilio Estevez, both 23. This age disparity created noticeable tension on set, as the adult actors sometimes treated their younger colleagues as kids rather than equals. The age gap became particularly evident during the film's more emotionally intense scenes. Director of photography Thomas Del Ruth noted, "You could see the difference in their approaches." The older actors relied on technique, while Molly and Anthony were experiencing these emotions in real time, which gave their performances a raw quality the others had to work harder to achieve. The production scheduled around Ringwald and Hall's mandatory 3 hours of daily schooling with an on-set tutor. This often meant that the older actors spent hours waiting while their teenage co-stars completed their studies, creating a strange parallel to the detention scenario they were portraying on screen. Hughes later admitted that this age discrepancy influenced his direction, as he found himself mediating not just between characters but between actors at vastly different stages of their lives. Number 7. A dream sequence was cut showing each character's fears. A surreal dream sequence that would have dramatically altered the film's tone was shot but ultimately cut from the final version. In this deleted scene, Allison falls asleep and imagines each character transformed into manifestations of their deepest fears and desires. The sequence featured Andrew as a gluttonous Viking tearing into a feast, reflecting his anxiety about losing control. Bender appeared as a prisoner in chains, symbolizing his fear of becoming trapped like his father. Claire was depicted as a bride being auctioned off, representing her dread of becoming just another trophy. Brian appeared as an astronaut floating helplessly in space, illustrating his terror of failure, while Allison herself was portrayed as a vampire, forever an outsider feeding on others. Hughes spent over $75,000 shooting this elaborate sequence, requiring extensive makeup, costumes, and set design. Test audiences found it jarring and confusing, breaking the realistic tone the film had carefully established. Editor Dede Allen fought to remove the sequence, arguing that it spelled out themes that were more powerful when left subtextual. Hughes initially resisted but eventually conceded that the dream sequence undermined rather than enhanced the film's emotional impact. The footage was believed lost until 2015, when fragments were discovered in the Universal Archives, though it remains unreleased to the public. Number 8. Anthony Michael Hall experienced a massive growth spurt during filming. When Anthony Michael Hall was cast as Brian Johnson, he stood at 5 feet 7 inches, perfectly embodying the diminutive brain dominated by his more physically imposing detention mates. By the time filming wrapped 3 months later, Hall had grown nearly 3 inches, creating a continuity nightmare for the production. Director of photography Thomas Del Ruth resorted to increasingly creative camera tricks to maintain the illusion of Hall's original height. In scenes filmed later in production, Hall often had to slouch or sit while others stood. In the memorable confrontation between Brian and Bender, Judd Nelson had to stand on an apple box to maintain his height advantage. The growth spurt became an inside joke among the cast. Nelson jokingly recalled in a 2010 interview, "I was 2 inches taller than him at auditions, half an inch taller in rehearsals, and by the end of filming, I was looking up at him. I started writing letters to geneticists to figure out what was happening." Hughes even incorporated this physical change into the narrative, adding subtle references to Brian's awkwardness in his own rapidly changing body. What could have been a production disaster instead reinforced the film's themes of transformation and the tumultuous nature of adolescence. Number 9, the circle confession scene was completely improvised. The film's emotional core, where the students sit in a circle revealing why they're in detention, wasn't scripted at all. John Hughes had outlined basic points each character should address, but told the actors to speak from their characters' hearts rather than memorized lines. This radical approach terrified the studio, which demanded written dialogue. Hughes placated executives by providing a script he never intended to use. On the day of shooting, he simply told the actors, "Forget what's written, just be these people." The cameras rolled for over 7 hours, capturing genuine emotional reactions as each actor revealed their character's vulnerabilities without knowing what their castmates would say. The rawness is palpable. When Brian discusses his suicide attempt, Anthony Michael Hall's voice cracks with emotion that wasn't performed but experienced in the moment. Ali Sheedy later revealed that this unstructured approach created real breakthrough moments for the cast. We stopped being actors reciting lines and started feeling what these kids were feeling? When I talk about my parents ignoring me, those tears weren't acting. They came from somewhere real inside me. Hughes used less than 20 minutes of the marathon session in the final cut, but this improvised approach gave the scene the authentic emotional resonance that continues to move audiences decades later. Number 10, the original cut was 2.5 hours long. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to reveal what might be the holy grail of lost cinema, a 150-minute director's cut of The Breakfast Club that almost no one has seen and might never be released. Hughes's initial vision was significantly longer and darker than the 97-minute theatrical version. The original cut included extended family backstories, a violent confrontation between Vernon and Carl, and a more ambiguous ending that questioned whether the students' newfound bonds would survive beyond detention. Universal executives panicked after the first test screening, declaring the film too long and too depressing for a teen movie. They demanded extensive cuts focusing on lightening the tone and accelerating the pace. Hughes fought fiercely but ultimately lost control of the final edit. In a devastating blow, the studio destroyed the negative footage of deleted scenes, considering them worthless at a time when extended cuts and bonus features weren't yet industry practice. Hughes, anticipating this possibility, secretly made a VHS copy of his original cut, the only complete version still in existence. After Hughes's death in 2009, his widow confirmed the director's cut existed in his personal archive, but has declined all requests to release it, honoring her husband's bitterness over the studio's interference. Film historians consider this unreleased version the most significant lost film of 1980s American cinema. Number 11, John Cusack was originally cast as Bender. John Cusack, not Judd Nelson, was John Hughes' first choice to play Rebel John Bender. Cusack spent weeks rehearsing the role and even filmed several scenes before being abruptly replaced. The decision wasn't about performance quality, but physical presence. Producer Ned Tannen felt that Cusack, then 18, looked too young and lacked the threatening edge needed for Bender. As casting director Jackie Birch explained, "We needed someone who could genuinely intimidate people, and John had this baby face that just wasn't scary." Cusack was devastated by the dismissal, particularly since Hughes had previously promised to build his career. The firing created such bad blood that Cusack avoided working with Hughes again, despite multiple opportunities. In a 2000 interview, Cusack admitted, "It took me years to get over that rejection. I thought I was perfect for Bender. Turns out I wasn't even close to what they wanted." Meanwhile, Nelson nearly lost the role himself by antagonizing Hughes during his audition. He deliberately arrived late, wearing Bender's costume and staying aggressively in character. The risky strategy paid off when Hughes declared, "That's not an actor playing Bender, that is Bender." The casting drama extended to Cusack's sister Joan, who was originally slated to play Allison before being replaced by Ali Sheedy, making the Cusack siblings' dismissal a double blow. Number 12, Hughes secretly played Brian's father in an uncredited cameo. In a blink and you'll miss it moment, John Hughes himself appears in the film as Brian Johnson's father, who picks him up at the end of detention. This uncredited cameo was never publicly acknowledged by Hughes during his lifetime. The director hadn't planned to appear on screen. The actor cast as Brian's father failed to show up on the scheduled day, creating a last-minute crisis. Rather than rearrange the shooting schedule, Hughes impulsively decided to play the role himself, donning a borrowed sports coat and quickly filming the brief scene. This cameo carries deeper symbolic significance. By casting himself as the father of the character who attempts suicide due to parental pressure, Hughes was acknowledging his own complicated relationship with authority and perfectionism. As Anthony Michael Hall later observed, John putting himself in that role was his way of taking responsibility for the pain his characters endured. The scene was shot from behind, showing only the back of Hughes's head, but his distinctive voice is recognizable when he asks, "So, how was it?" Brian's resigned response, "Fine, Dad," carries extra weight knowing it's directed at the film's creator himself. This subtle appearance creates a meta-connection between Hughes and his most personal film, literally placing him in the world he created. Number 13. The nude teacher scene. That Molly Ringwald got cut. An eyebrow-raising scene featuring Principal Vernon spying on a naked female teacher through a peephole was filmed but removed from the final cut after Molly Ringwald strongly objected to its inclusion. The scene was intended to reinforce Vernon's hypocrisy, condemning the students while engaging in his own inappropriate behavior. Paul Gleason filmed the sequence, which showed Vernon discovering a secret peephole into the women's faculty locker room where a swimming instructor was emerging nude from the pool. When Ringwald read this scene in the script, she immediately approached Hughes, arguing that it was gratuitously sexist and undermined the film's otherwise thoughtful examination of power dynamics. Despite pressure from male executives who thought the scene was funny, Hughes sided with his young star and agreed to cut it. The actress who had been cast as the swimming teacher was reportedly furious, as the role would have been her first significant screen appearance. Hughes compensated by writing her a small speaking part in his next film. This behind-the-scenes stand against objectification seems particularly prescient, given today's conversations about gender representation. Ringwald later reflected, "I'm proud that even as a teenager, I recognized something wasn't right and spoke up about it." Number 14. The characters' futures were revealed in a cut scene. A fascinating deleted scene revealed the fates of all 5 students through a conversation between Carl the janitor and Principal Vernon. In this cynical exchange, they predict where each detention-bound teenager will end up in 30 years. Carl prophesies that Bender will die young by suicide or overdose, never escaping his cycle of abuse. He sees Claire undergoing 2 boob jobs and a facelift, becoming exactly the shallow socialite she fears becoming. Brian, Carl predicts, will achieve tremendous professional success but die of a heart attack by 40, driven by the same perfectionism that nearly destroyed him in high school. For Allison, he envisions a future as a brilliant but unrecognized poet whose work is discovered only after her death. And Andrew, the athlete, is predicted to marry a beautiful airline stewardess who becomes overweight, leading him to silently resent her while coaching high school wrestling and reliving his glory days. Vernon dismisses these predictions, revealing his own bitterness about his failed ambitions. The scene ends with Carl suggesting Vernon himself once sat in detention, hinting at a cycle of disillusionment. Hughes cut this scene after recognizing it contradicted the film's hopeful conclusion. Instead of predetermined fates, he wanted audiences to believe these students could transcend their stereotypes and rewrite their stories, a message that gives the film its enduring power. Number 15. Ally Sheedy's dandruff was actually Parmesan cheese. The memorable scene where Allison creates snow by dandruff shaking her hair was actually achieved using grated Parmesan cheese hidden in Ally Sheedy's wig. This seemingly minor detail required surprising technical ingenuity to execute effectively. Makeup department head Mary Swanson initially attempted to create fake dandruff using various white substances, including baby powder, crushed aspirin, and even actual dandruff collected from brushes. None looked convincing on camera or stayed properly distributed in Sheedy's hair. The breakthrough came during a lunch break when Swanson noticed Parmesan cheese on a salad. She immediately recognized its perfect texture and weight for mimicking dandruff flakes. Sheedy, however, was less than thrilled with this solution. By the end of the day, the cheese had begun to spoil under the hot lights, Sheedy recalled in a 2010 interview. The smell was horrific, and I had to wash my hair multiple times to get rid of it. For weeks after, I couldn't even look at Italian food. The cheese solution created another unexpected problem: mice. Overnight, rodents invaded the set, attracted by the dairy product scattered across the floor. Crew members arrived the next morning to find tiny footprints throughout the library set, requiring emergency cleaning before filming could resume. This small but memorable moment exemplifies the film's attention to authentic details, even when achieving them required unorthodox methods. Number 16, the dance sequence was only meant for Claire. The exuberant dance montage that showcases each character's unique personality was originally written as a solo sequence for Claire alone. Molly Ringwald, uncomfortable with being the singular focus, requested that Hughes expand the scene to include the entire group. Ringwald, a trained dancer since childhood, was initially excited about the showcase opportunity. However, after filming began, she experienced intense performance anxiety. The idea of dancing alone in front of the crew and cast was terrifying, she later admitted. I kept freezing up and forgetting the choreography. Rather than scrap the sequence, Hughes transformed it into the collaborative moment that became one of the film's most beloved scenes. Each actor was instructed to dance as their character would, without choreography or direction. The authentic, unpolished quality of their movements perfectly captured the film's essence. Judd Nelson initially refused to participate, staying in character as the reluctant Bender. Hughes cleverly incorporated this resistance into the scene, showing Bender's gradual surrender to the group's joyful abandon as a visual representation of his emotional walls coming down. Ironically, Ringwald later expressed disappointment with the final sequence, feeling it disrupted the film's realistic tone. Yet audiences consistently rank it among their favorite moments, a rare instance where a compromise created something more meaningful than the original vision. Number 17. The marijuana smoking scene almost earned an X rating. The sequence where the teens smoke marijuana triggered an intense battle with the Motion Picture Association of America, which initially threatened the film with a career-killing X rating, the MPAA. Objectors weren't just concerned about the drug use itself, but the seemingly positive portrayal, showing the characters bonding and experiencing joy rather than suffering negative consequences. Head censor Richard Hefner explicitly told Hughes, "You're making drug use look fun, and we can't allow that." Hughes refused to cut the scene entirely, arguing it was essential to the character's emotional unburdening. Instead, he agreed to several compromises, reducing the number of visible inhalations, adding Vernon's disapproving reaction, and inserting Brian's line about it being Bender's first and last time in the group. Even with these changes, the film barely secured its R rating. Universal executives were still concerned, fearing the rating would limit the teen audience. Hughes stood firm, arguing that an authentic portrayal of teen life required acknowledging realities like recreational drug use. The compromise solution proved effective. Teens still recognized the authentic portrayal of their experiences, while the film avoided glorifying drug use. Years later, Hughes admitted his one regret was the unrealistic shattered glass effect used during the scene, which he felt undermined the film's otherwise grounded realism. Number 18, John Hughes documented every day of filming in detail. Throughout production, John Hughes maintained an extraordinarily detailed director's journal, capturing not just technical notes but his personal observations about the actors' emotional states and interpersonal dynamics. This wasn't a typical shooting diary. Hughes wrote up to 20 pages daily, documenting conversations, conflicts, and breakthroughs. He included psychological profiles of each actor, noting how their personalities aligned with or diverged from their characters. These insights informed his directing approach, allowing him to subtly manipulate real tensions to enhance on-screen chemistry. Hughes was particularly fixated on capturing the cast's natural interactions between takes, believing these moments revealed their authentic teenage qualities better than scripted scenes. He positioned hidden microphones around the set to record conversations when actors thought they weren't being observed, later incorporating their natural speech patterns into rewrites. After Hughes's death in 2009, excerpts from this journal were published in Vanity Fair, revealing his remarkable insight into adolescent psychology. One entry reads, "Watching them together, I realized teenagers don't actually become different people around different social groups. They just reveal different facets of themselves depending on who feels safe." This methodical documentation helps explain the film's uncanny authenticity. Hughes wasn't just writing about teenagers, he was studying them with anthropological precision throughout the creative process. Number 19, Universal initially refused to release the film. Universal Studios executives were so dismayed by early cuts of The Breakfast Club that they seriously considered shelving the film entirely or releasing it straight to video, convinced it would fail catastrophically at the box office. Studio head Sid Sheinberg famously dismissed it as 5 kids sitting around talking and questioned its commercial viability. After a disastrous test screening where audience members complained about the lack of action, Universal reduced the marketing budget to the bare minimum and scheduled a limited February release, traditionally a dumping ground for films expected to underperform. Hughes, devastated by the studio's lack of faith, personally called theater owners across the country, begging them to screen the film. He even offered to appear in person at opening weekend showings to draw crowds, a highly unusual move for a director. The studio's skepticism seemed justified when the film opened to modest numbers. But something extraordinary happened. Teenagers began returning for multiple viewings, bringing friends and family. The word-of-mouth phenomenon built steadily, transforming the film into a sleeper hit that eventually grossed over $50 million against its $1 million budget. Universal executives who had nearly buried the film suddenly claimed credit for its success, with Sheinberg later insisting he had always seen its potential. Hughes never forgot this betrayal, building studio autonomy clauses into all his future contracts. Number 20. Hughes planned but abandoned a sequel every 10 years. John Hughes envisioned The Breakfast Club as the beginning of a lifelong project, a series of films that would reunite the same characters at 10-year intervals, showing how their lives evolved after that transformative Saturday detention. The sequel, tentatively titled The Breakfast Club 10 Years Later, was scheduled for 1995 and would have shown the characters in their mid-20s, struggling with careers, relationships, and adult responsibilities. Hughes completed a draft screenplay that explored whether their detention-forged bonds survived in the real world or if they had regressed to their stereotypical roles. Early drafts revealed fascinating character trajectories: Bender operating a landscaping business while battling addiction, Claire unhappily married to a wealthy businessman, Andrew injured and coaching wrestling, Brian working at a tech company but still seeking parental approval, and Allison as a struggling artist beginning to find recognition. The project collapsed due to multiple factors. Hughes's relationship with Judd Nelson had deteriorated beyond repair. Molly Ringwald had distanced herself from teen roles, seeking more adult opportunities. Most significantly, Hughes himself had grown disillusioned with Hollywood and was retreating from filmmaking altogether. A bittersweet irony emerged as the actors themselves lived out some version of Hughes's vision. When they reunited for a 2010 interview, their adult dynamics eerily mirrored their character arcs, life imitating art in ways even Hughes couldn't have scripted. Bonus fact: the film's most enduring image, Bender triumphantly pumping his fist in the air as he walks across the football field, wasn't planned at all. It was a spontaneous gesture by Judd Nelson on the final day of shooting that almost didn't make it into the movie. The original script simply called for Bender to walk away after kissing Claire's diamond earring. Director of photography Thomas Del Ruth had already captured this version when Hughes, unsatisfied with the ending's impact, asked Nelson to try something different for one final take. With no specific direction, Nelson walked across the field, then suddenly thrust his fist skyward in a gesture of defiance and victory. The crew erupted in applause, immediately recognizing the powerful visual metaphor. Hughes later called it the perfect unscripted moment. It said everything about Bender's journey without a single word. The gesture has transcended the film to become a universal symbol of triumph against the odds. From sporting events to political rallies, the raised fist has been replicated countless times, though many who use it don't know its cinematic origin. Nelson himself never expected the moment to become iconic. In a 2018 interview, he revealed, "It wasn't planned or thought out. No, it just felt right in that moment. This kid who's been beaten down his whole life finally winning, even if just for a day. I had no idea people would still be talking about it decades later." This spontaneous action encapsulates what made The Breakfast Club special: authentic emotion that resonates across generations, reminding us that sometimes the most powerful moments can't be scripted. The Breakfast Club wasn't supposed to succeed. Every industry metric predicted its failure: too talky, too contained, too honest about the painful realities of adolescence. Yet 40 years later, it remains the definitive teen film because it dared to respect its audience instead of pandering to them. What happened in that fictional library transcended entertainment to become a cultural touchstone. The film didn't just capture a moment in time, it captured timeless emotions that continue to resonate with each new generation. Whether watched in 1985 on the big screen or streamed today on a phone, the emotional truth remains equally powerful. The stories behind the film's creation mirror its central message that beneath polished surfaces lie complicated, messy realities. The finished product appears seamless, but it emerged from conflict, compromise, and creative chaos. Just like the characters themselves, the film's journey was one of struggle and transformation. So next time you watch these five strangers stride into detention, remember what was happening when the cameras stopped rolling. Remember the fired actors, the improvised moments, the studio battles, and the creative vision that refused to be compromised. Because in the end, we're not just watching a movie about authenticity, we're watching authenticity itself, captured on film for all time. Don't you forget about that.